In a restaurant in Querétaro, a 6-year-old girl walks towards an unknown man, a millionaire who has had his heart closed for years, and says something that breaks him completely. "Sir, my mom is also alone." That phrase, said with the innocence that only a child has, is about to change 3 lives forever. Stay until the end and discover how a failed encounter became the beginning of something that none of them imagined possible. Renata pushes the door of the restaurant with a trembling hand, while with the other she firmly holds Thalia's hand. She's 36 years old and has learned to face the world alone. But tonight something tells her that maybe, only maybe, loneliness could end. The aroma of mole and freshly made tortillas fills the place, and the warm lights of the restaurant contrast with the cold she feels in her chest. Thalia, with her 6 years and her curious eyes, looks around, fascinated by the tables decorated with chopped paper and flowers of cempasúchil. Renata looks with her gaze at the man she met through an application, that Ricardo who seemed kind in the messages. She finds him sitting near the window, dressed in a light shirt and an educated smile that freezes as soon as she sees them come together. Renata takes a deep breath and walks towards him with Thalia by his side, because she decided a long time ago that honesty was the only possible path. He is not going to hide his daughter. He is not going to pretend to be someone he is not, although that means facing rejection over and over again. Ricardo stands up courteously when they arrive at the table, but his eyes have already said everything. Renata notices it immediately, that brightness that goes out, that smile that becomes more tense, that body language that screams what her lips still do not dare to say. Thalia, oblivious to the tension, smiles and greets with her hand, her dress moving as she makes a small reverence that she learned by watching cartoons. The moment stretches uncomfortably, and Renata feels how the sleep of this night begins to crumble before even sitting down. Ricardo scratches and looks at his watch with a gesture that pretends to be casual, but that is obvious. "Renata, nice to meet you at last," says with a voice that sounds hollow, empty of the warmth it had in the text messages. He bends down to stay at Thalia's height and smiles at her, but it is a professional, distant smile, the same one he would use with a client's daughter. "And you must be Thalia. Your mother told me about you," he adds, although Renata knows that this is a lie. She never mentioned her daughter in the previous conversations because she wanted to wait for the right moment. Thalia sits down with enthusiasm and begins to talk about her favorite doll. But Ricardo is no longer listening. He quickly joins in and looks at Renata with an expression that tries to be understanding, but only reflects discomfort. "Look, Renata, something just came up," he starts to say, and she already knows what is coming. She has heard the same phrase in different versions too many times. "A family emergency. My sister just called me, and I need to leave immediately," he continues, taking out his wallet and leaving some bills on the table in a hurry. Renata feels in silence. There are no tears, there are no claims, only a tired acceptance of a reality she knows too well. Ricardo says goodbye with an, "It was a pleasure meeting you." That sounds like a final farewell, and leaves the restaurant without looking back, his hurried steps resonating against the ceramic floor. Renata sits down slowly in the chair he left empty and helps Thalia get into the chair next to her. Thalia swings her legs, still smiling, and asks, "Did the man leave already, Mommy?" Renata swallows the knot she has in her throat and nods, caressing her daughter's dark hair with tenderness. "Yes, my love." "He had to leave," she responds with a voice that tries to sound normal. Although inside, something breaks again. Thalia looks at her with those huge eyes that see everything, that perceive more than what a 6-year-old girl should perceive. "It was because of me, Mommy," she asks in a low voice. And those 5 words destroy Renata more than any rejection. She leans towards her daughter and takes her hands firmly, looking for her eyes so she sees the truth. "Listen to me well, Thalia," she tells her with a serious voice, but full of love. "None of this is your fault. It never has been, nor will it be." Thalia nods, but Renata sees the shadow of doubt that remains in her look. That invisible wound that forms when a child begins to believe that they are an obstacle. The waiter approaches with a menu, and Renata orders something simple to share, although she knows that neither of them has much of an appetite. The voices of the other tables fill the silence between them. Laughter and conversations that contrast with the stillness of her small table by the window. Renata looks outside, where the lights of Querétaro shine in the night, and wonders if someday she will find someone who sees them as a complete package, not as a problem to avoid. Thalia takes out a small drawing notebook from the backpack, which she always carries, and begins to trace lines with a crayon. Her way of processing the world when words are not enough. The restaurant is full for being a Wednesday night. Couples having dinner, families celebrating, and Renata feels like an intruder in that world of connections that seem to work for everyone, except for her. She has worked 12 hours a day cleaning offices to give Thalia a dignified life. So she has clean clothes and school supplies. So she never feels that she lacks something material, even if she lacks a father. She left school when she got pregnant at 29 years old, when the man who swore to love her disappeared as soon as he knew that Thalia was on the way. 4 years without knowing anything about him. 4 years of being mom and dad at the same time. Of drying tears and celebrating achievements alone. Of wondering if someday she would feel butterflies in her stomach for someone again. This dating application was her friend Rocio's idea, who insisted that Renata deserved a chance to be happy, to be something more than just a mom. And here she is, on her 3rd failed attempt in 2 months, watching how men flee as soon as they discover she does not come alone. Thalia looks up from her drawing and points towards a nearby table. "Mommy, that man is also all alone," she says with that capacity that children have to say uncomfortable truths without a filter. Renata follows the direction of her finger and sees a man sitting alone, looking at his glass of wine with an expression she recognizes because she has seen it in the mirror too many times. It is the expression of someone who is physically present but emotionally absent, of someone who also knows the bitter taste of loneliness. Renata quickly looks away, embarrassed to have been caught observing a stranger, and turns her attention back to Thalia. "It is not polite to point at people, my love," she tells her softly, although without real scolding in her voice. Thalia nods and returns to her drawing, tracing what seems to be a house with 3 figures, one big, one medium, and one small. Renata feels her throat close upon seeing that drawing, that family her daughter imagines. But that reality insists on denying her. The waiter brings the tacos she ordered, and Thalia eats with the natural appetite of a 6-year-old girl, oblivious to the weight her mother carries on her shoulders. Renata barely tastes a bite, her mind spinning between the rejection of this night in all the previous ones, wondering if she should give up, if she should accept that her destiny is to be alone until Thalia grows up. The background music changes to a romantic song by Vicente Fernandez, and someone at a distant table sings along with the lyrics, out of tune but happy. Renata closes her eyes for a moment and breathes deeply, reminding herself that tomorrow is another day, that she has to be strong for Thalia, that she cannot afford the luxury of breaking down. When she opens them, Thalia is looking at her with concern, and Renata gives her the best smile she can muster. "Are you okay, Mommy?" the girl asks, and Renata nods, although both know that it is only half true. But what neither of them knows is that just a few meters away, someone else is about to live his own moment of defeat. Fernando lifts his glass of red wine and watches the liquid move under the restaurant lights, looking for some kind of answer in his distorted reflection. He is 42 years old, has a real estate development company worth millions of pesos, and a void in his chest that no professional success has managed to fill. The woman sitting in front of him, Gabriela, talks animatedly about her work in an art gallery, but her words bounce off Fernando without really penetrating. It has been 5 years since that devastating morning when he arrived at the church and found only a text message. "I can't do it. Forgive me. Forgive." 5 years since Paulina, the woman he thought would be his wife, stood him up 3 days before the wedding, without real explanations, without an opportunity to understand what went wrong. Since then, he has built walls around his heart, walls so high and thick that not even he is sure he can tear them down. This encounter, like the 3 previous ones in the last month, is another failed attempt by his sister Laura to get him out of his emotional isolation. Gabriela is beautiful, intelligent, successful in her field, exactly the type of woman who should interest him. But Fernando feels nothing, only that familiar numbness that has become his natural state. She talks about a recent Frida Kahlo exhibition, and he nods mechanically, smiling at the appropriate moments. But his mind is elsewhere, in that empty church from 5 years ago. Gabriela stops in the middle of a sentence and looks him directly in the eyes. "You aren't listening to anything I'm saying, are you?" she asks without anger, only with a sad resignation that Fernando has seen before in other women. He opens his mouth to deny it, to feign interest, but the words don't come out because he knows she is right. "I'm sorry," he says finally, leaving his glass on the table with more force than necessary. "It's nothing personal against you, Gabriela. You are an incredible woman." She lets out a soft laugh that has no humor in it. "But I am not the woman for you." She completes the sentence he didn't dare to say. Fernando nods, grateful that she understands, that there is no drama or scene. Gabriela takes her bag and stands up with grace, smoothing her dress with an elegant gesture. "Do you know what is sad, Fernando?" she says, leaning slightly towards him. "That you are so locked in your pain that you don't even realize the opportunities you let pass by." He doesn't answer because there is nothing to say, because she just verbalized the truth he knows, but refuses to face. Gabriela touches his shoulder briefly, a gesture of farewell that has more compassion than resentment. "I hope someday you find what you are looking for," she adds before walking away, her heels resonating against the ceramic floor as she walks towards the exit. Fernando watches her go without trying to stop her, because it would be cruel to give her hopes he cannot fulfill. He stays alone at the table, surrounded by the murmur of others' conversations, and feels more isolated than ever, despite being in a place full of people. He calls the waiter with a gesture and asks for another glass of wine, although he knows alcohol is not going to fill the void he feels. His phone vibrates in his pocket, and he takes out the device to see a message from his sister Laura. "How is the date going?" Fernando writes quickly. "She left. It didn't work." Again, the 3 dots appear indicating that Laura is writing, but he turns off the screen before the answer arrives. He doesn't have the energy to deal with his sister's concern tonight. He looks around the restaurant and observes the couples dining, laughing, touching hands over the tables, and wonders when he lost the ability to do that. Before Paulina, it was different. He was a man who believed in love, who planned to have a family, who saw the future with hope. Now he is just a shell that goes to work, that closes deals, that accumulates money he doesn't need because he has no one to share it with. His 3 nephews, Laura's children, are the only thing that keeps him connected to something resembling joy. When he is with them playing or telling stories, he manages to forget for moments that he is broken, but then he returns to his empty apartment in downtown Querétaro, to those white walls and that silence that suffocates him, and remembers that this is all there is. The waiter brings the second glass of wine, and Fernando takes a long sip, letting the liquid warm his throat. From his table, he has a partial view of the restaurant, and unintentionally, his gaze settles on a young woman sitting with a small girl. Something in the woman's posture catches his attention, that way of holding her shoulders very straight, as if she were making an effort not to collapse. The girl draws something in a notebook, her legs swinging under the chair, completely concentrated on her task. Fernando feels a strange pang in his chest, something similar to recognition, because he sees in that woman the same type of loneliness he carries. He wonders what story is behind that table for 2, why they are alone in a restaurant on a Wednesday night, but looks away quickly because it is none of his business. His phone vibrates again, and this time it is a work email. Something about a contract he needs to review tomorrow morning. Fernando responds mechanically, grateful to have something to focus his mind on other than his own self-destructive thoughts. He has built an empire of properties and real estate developments, working 16 hours a day, filling every minute of his life with meetings and numbers so as not to have to face the silence. But here, in this restaurant, without work to distract him, silence finds him anyway. He finishes his second glass of wine and considers ordering a third, but it knows that getting drunk is not going to solve anything. It is only going to make tomorrow harder. He thinks about Gabriella's words about being locked in his pain and wonders if she is right, if he is really letting opportunities pass by clinging to a wound from 5 years ago. But then he remembers the sensation of entering that church, of seeing the empty pews, of reading that cowardly message, and the walls are reinforced again. It's not that he doesn't want to love, it's that he doesn't know how to trust again, how to open up again, knowing that someone can destroy him that easily. He looks at his watch and sees that it is almost 9 at night. He should go home, but the idea of returning to that empty apartment is unbearable to him. The waiter passes by, and Fernando is about to ask for the check when he hears a small, clear voice, which cuts through the general murmur of the restaurant. "Mommy, that man is also all alone," says the girl at the nearby table. Fernando pretends not to hear, concentrating on his empty glass, but feels how something stirs inside him. The mother says something to the girl in a low voice, probably scolding her for pointing. And Fernando feels a strange mixture of shame and understanding because the girl is right. He is alone, more alone than he's been in his entire life. And in this moment, surrounded by happy couples and reunited families, that loneliness weighs more than ever. What Fernando doesn't know is that that girl is about to tell him something that will break all the walls he has built with such care. Thalia drops the crayon she has in her hand and stares toward the table where Fernando is sitting alone, with that sad expression she recognizes because she has seen it in the mirror when her mom thinks she isn't watching her. The girl tilts her head slightly, studying the man as only children can do, without filters or judgments, only with that pure curiosity that does not understand social barriers. Renata is distracted looking out the window, lost in her thoughts about the rejection of this night and all the previous ones, when she feels Thalia get down from the chair. Kim, where are you going, my love? She asks, turning quickly, but Thalia is already walking with small but determined steps towards the stranger's table. Renata feels panic rising up her throat and half rises from her seat, ready to stop her daughter. But something in the determination of those steps paralyzes her. Thalia dodges a waiter carrying a tray full of dishes, her shoes making a soft sound against the floor, and Renata follows her with her gaze, not daring to breathe. The restaurant music seems to lower in volume, or maybe it is just that Renata is so concentrated on her daughter that everything else disappears. Thalia arrives at Fernando's table and stops right next to him, waiting patiently for the man to notice her presence. Fernando, lost in his own dark thoughts, takes a few seconds to realize there is someone next to him. When he finally looks up, he meets the huge and bright eyes of a girl looking at him with a mixture of shyness and bravery that disarms him completely. Fernando blinks, confused by the unexpected presence of the little one next to his table, and looks around looking for some responsible adult who can explain the situation. He sees a woman he recognizes as the one sitting with the girl, now standing with an expression of alarm on her face, clearly ready to intervene if necessary. Fernando returns his attention to the girl and leans slightly forward, lowering his height so as not to intimidate her. "Hi, little one," he says with a voice softer than he has used in months. "Are you lost?" Thalia shakes her head, her pigtails moving with the gesture, and hugs herself as she does when she is about to say something important. "I am not lost," she responds with that clear voice children have when they are completely sure of what they are going to say. Fernando waits, not understanding what this girl is doing next to his table, not understanding why he feels this moment has a weight he cannot explain. Thalia breathes deeply, just as she sees her mom do when she needs courage, and says the words that are about to change everything. "Sir, my mom is also alone." Time stops. The conversations around continue. The dishes keep clinking. The music keeps playing. But for Fernando, it is as if someone had pressed pause on the entire universe. Those 6 words, said with a brutal honesty that only a child can have, pierce all the defenses he has built in 5 years. He feels something break in his chest, something he had kept frozen for so long that he didn't even remember it was there. Renata comes running to the table, her face burning with shame, and takes Thalia by the hand more firmly than necessary. I am so sorry, she says to Fernando without looking him directly in the eyes. My daughter sometimes doesn't understand that she shouldn't bother strangers. She tries to pull Thalia back to her table, but the girl resists, her small feet planted firmly on the ground. Fernando raises a hand in a gesture that stops Renata's apologies, and when she finally looks at him, he sees in her eyes the same pain he's been carrying, the same loneliness that haunts him every night. She is not bothering me, says Fernando, and it is the first complete truth he has said in weeks. He stands up slowly, his height imposing but his posture soft, not threatening, and looks at Thalia with something that could be the beginning of a smile. What is your name? He asks the girl, ignoring the social protocol that says he should address the mother first. Thalia smiles widely, proud to be the center of attention. My name is Thalia. I am 6 years old, and my mom's name is Renata. She responds with all the information at once, as only children do. Fernando nods solemnly, as if he had just received crucial data. It is a pleasure to meet you, Thalia, he says, and then looks at Renata, really looks at her for the first time, seeing beyond the shame on her face. He sees a young woman who has fought battles he cannot imagine, who carries her loneliness with dignity, who is here trying to find some happiness, despite the tiredness that marks her posture. He sees someone who understands exactly how he feels. The restaurant continues its normal rhythm around them, but in that small space between the two tables, something extraordinary is happening. Fernando feels how his heart, that muscle he has kept in survival mode for 5 years, begins to beat with a different rhythm. It is not love at first sight, nothing so simple or dramatic. It is something deeper and more terrifying. It is possibility, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he is not condemned to live, locked in his pain forever. He looks at Thalia, who observes him with those eyes full of childish hope, and thinks of his 3 nephews, of how he has always felt comfortable with children, because they don't judge, they don't have ulterior motives, they are just genuine. Thalia is right, says Fernando, and his voice sounds strange even to him, as if rusty from lack of emotional use. I am also alone. Renata opens her eyes with surprise, clearly not expecting this man to admit something so personal to 2 complete strangers. Fernando points to the empty chair in front of him, the same one Gabriela left just minutes ago. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this, he continues, the words coming out before his logical brain can stop them. But would you like to sit with me? Renata remains frozen, processing the invitation, looking for some sign that this is a cruel joke or some kind of trap. But all she sees in Fernando's eyes is sincerity and a vulnerability she recognizes because it is the same she feels. Thalia doesn't wait for her mother's answer and is already pulling Renata's hand towards Fernando's table. Renata lets Thalia guide her, her legs moving on autopilot, while her mind tries to understand exactly what is happening. She sits in the chair Fernando offers her, and he helps Thalia get into another chair with a gentleness that makes something melt in Renata's chest. I am Fernando, says the man, extending his hand across the table, and Renata takes it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. Renata responds, although he already knows her name thanks to Thalia. The waiter approaches confused, seeing that the configuration of the tables has changed, and Fernando asks them to bring the dishes from the other table to this one, also ordering lemonade for Thalia, without needing to ask. Thalia settles in her chair, swinging her legs happily, completely oblivious to the magnitude of what she just did. Renata cannot stop looking at this man who just invited them to his table, seeking to understand his motives, protecting herself against the disappointment she knows could come. Fernando looks back at her, and in that silent exchange, both recognize something in the other. Two people who have been hurt, but still have the courage to be here, trying. Is she always so direct? Fernando asks with a small smile, nodding towards Thalia. Renata lets out a nervous laugh, which comes out more like a sigh. Since she learned to talk, she responds, and feels some of the tension leave her shoulders. The waiter brings the plates and the lemonade, and when he walks away, the three remain, in a silence that is not uncomfortable, only expectant. And Fernando, looking at the girl who had the courage to say what he never dared to admit, feels for the first time in 5 years that maybe love didn't arrive too late after all. Fernando observes Thalia, while the girl drinks her lemonade with both hands around the glass, her eyes shining with the simple satisfaction of something sweet and cold. There is something in the presence of this girl which disarms all the defenses he has built so carefully, something in her brutal honesty that reminds him that there are ways of living that do not involve hiding behind emotional walls. Never in 5 years, in all the failed encounters his sister Laura has organized, had he dared to do something as spontaneous as inviting someone to his table. He has always been cautious, measured, controlled, keeping people at a safe distance where they cannot hurt him. But this 6-year-old girl just shattered that strategy with 6 simple words. And Fernando finds himself doing something he swore he would never do, opening himself to possibility. He looks at Renata, who fiddles nervously with her napkin, clearly out of her comfort zone, and sees reflected in her the same uncertainty he feels. The restaurant continues its bustle around them, couples laughing, families sharing, and for the first time in years, Fernando doesn't feel like a spectator of other people's happiness. He feels, albeit shyly, like part of something. Thalia places her glass on the table carefully and looks at Fernando with childish curiosity. "Why are you alone, sir?" she asks without malice, only with that need children have to understand the world. Fernando feels Renata tense up, ready to scold her daughter for being nosy, but he raises a hand gently to indicate it is okay. "Well, Thalia?" Fernando begins choosing his words carefully because he feels this girl deserves honesty. "A long time ago, I was going to get married, but the person I was going to marry decided she didn't want to be with me." He says it simply, without the dramatic weight that story has for him, because he is talking to a 6-year-old girl. Thalia frowns, processing the information with the seriousness children reserve for important matters. "That was very ugly of her," she declares with conviction. And Fernando feels a genuine laugh bubbling in his chest, something he hasn't felt in so long he almost forgot it. Yes, it was quite ugly, he agrees, and looks at Renata, who observes him with a mixture of surprise and something that seems like understanding. There is a moment of silence where only the clinking of silverware around is heard, and then Renata speaks for the first time since they sat down. "Thalia's dad left us when she was 2 years old," she says with a calm voice, but with a barely perceptible tremor that reveals how much it cost her to say those words. He didn't even say goodbye. He just disappeared. Fernando looks her directly in the eyes and nods, without the judgment or pity Renata has probably seen in other looks, only understanding from someone who also knows what it is to be abandoned. 4 years without knowing anything about him, Renata continues, as if the floodgates had opened and the words needed to come out. 4 years of being everything for Thalia, of trying to fill the void he left. Fernando listens without interrupting, giving her the space she needs to share her story. Thalia, oblivious to the depth of the conversation, has taken out her drawing notebook and is tracing something new, her crayon moving with concentration over the paper. Fernando observes her and feels a strange warmth in his chest, something he hadn't felt since his nephews were babies. "Do you have children?" Renata asks, following his gaze towards Thalia. Fernando shakes his head. "No, but I have 3 nephews who are my world," he responds, and there is a genuine shine in his eyes when he speaks of them. Matteo is 8 years old. The twins Sofia and Valeria are 5. Renata smiles for the first time since they sat down, a real smile that illuminates her tired face. "So, you know what it is to be surrounded by childish energy," she says with a tone that mixes exhaustion and love. Fernando laughs softly. "I know it very well. Last Sunday they convinced me to build a fort with all the pillows in my sister's house." Thalia looks up from her drawing upon hearing the word fort. "A pillow fort?" she asks with very wide eyes. "Can I go play there too?" There is a moment of uncomfortable silence in which Renata blushes, and Fernando realizes that Thalia just assumed there will be more encounters, that this is not just a casual dinner. But instead of feeling panic or wanting to back away, Fernando feels something different, something that could be hope. "Of course you can," he says before thinking too much. "The next time we build one, we will invite you." Renata looks at him surprised, searching his face for some sign that he is just being polite. But all she finds is sincerity. The waiter returns to ask if they wish to order anything else, and Fernando orders dessert without consulting. 3 orders of Neapolitan flan, which is the house specialty. Thalia claps with enthusiasm, and Renata doesn't have the heart to say no, although she knows the sugar is going to keep her daughter awake until late. While they wait for dessert, Fernando finds himself telling them about his real estate development company, but not in the boastful way he normally talks about his work, but in a more personal, more human way. He talks about how he started from the bottom, working in construction during his college summers, learning every aspect of the business before venturing on his own. Renata listens fascinated, not by the money or success, but by the passion she detects in his voice when he speaks of creating spaces where families build their lives. "It must be beautiful," Renata says softly, "creating something permanent, something that lasts." Fernando looks at her and nods. "It was," he responds honestly. "But at some point it became just work, just numbers and contracts." There is something vulnerable in that admission, something that tells Renata this man is not used to sharing these truths. The flan arrives on 3 perfect plates, decorated with liquid caramel, and Thalia attacks hers with the enthusiasm of someone who considers dessert one of the great pleasures of life. Fernando watches her eat and smiles, a genuine smile that reaches his eyes, and Renata feels something move in her chest, This man, this stranger her daughter approached, with a bravery she would never have, does not see Thalia as an obstacle or a complication. He sees her for what she is, a beautiful girl who deserves flan and pillow forts. There is a supervised play area in the restaurant, says Fernando suddenly, pointing towards a corner where Renata can see a small zone with toys and an employee watching two children. If Thalia wants to go play for a while, we could talk. There's an implicit question in that pause, an invitation to have an adult conversation without childish filters. Renata looks at her daughter, who is already finishing her flan with impressive efficiency, and then looks at Fernando. She should feel fear. She should protect herself. She should remember all the men who have fled as soon as they discover she is a mother. But all she feels is curiosity and something that could be the beginning of trust. "Would you like to go play, my love?" she asks Thalia, who is already naughty, before she finishes the question. Fernando gets up and extends his hand to Thalia, who takes it without hesitation, trusting this stranger with the ease children have to recognize good people. Renata watches them walk towards the play area, Fernando leaning down to listen to something Thalia is telling him animatedly, and feels her eyes get wet. It has been 4 years since anyone, besides her, has shown this type of genuine attention towards her daughter. It has been 4 years since anyone has treated them as something more than an unwanted responsibility. Fernando returns to the table after ensuring Thalia is happily entertained with building blocks, and sits in front of Renata with a serious but kind expression. "Renata," he says her name as if he were testing how it sounds in his voice. "I know this is strange, that basically we are two strangers that a brave girl decided to put together, but can we talk? Really?" And Renata, looking at this man who in one night has shown more genuine interest than all the failed encounters of the last months, nods. Because for the first time in years, someone is asking for her story without already planning his escape. Renata looks towards the play area, where Thalia builds a tower of blocks with absolute concentration, and then turns her attention back to Fernando, who observes her with an intensity that should intimidate her, but strangely does not. The silence between them is not uncomfortable. It is expectant, charged with words both need to say, but don't know how to start. Fernando takes a sip of water and places the glass on the table carefully, as if he were organizing his thoughts along with his movements. "I don't do this," he says finally, his voice low but clear. "I don't invite strangers to my table. I don't share my story. I don't allow myself to feel." Renata listens without interrupting, recognizing the courage that confession requires. "Since Polina stood me up 3 days before the wedding, I have lived in automatic mode," he continues, looking at his hands on the table. "I work, visit my sister and my nephews, sleep and repeat. There is no space for anything else, because space hurts." Renata nods, understanding perfectly what he is not saying, because she has lived her own version of that pain. "I had to arrive at the church and find it empty," says Fernando, and there is a crack in his voice he does not try to hide. All the guests waiting, the flowers, the music, everything ready, and me standing there with a text message that said, "I can't do it. Forgive me." Renata feels her heart shrink for him, for that man who was humiliated on what should have been the happiest day of his life. 5 years have passed since then, Fernando continues, looking up to find Renata's eyes. 5 years of building walls higher and higher, of convincing myself that being alone is safer than risking feeling that pain again. He runs a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. My sister Laura has tried to introduce me to different women, and all have been wonderful, intelligent, beautiful, but I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. Renata listens to every word, as if they were pieces of a puzzle that finally begin to fit. Until tonight, says Fernando, and there is something vulnerable in his look that makes Renata hold her breath. Until a 6-year-old girl had the courage to say out loud what I have been denying for years, Renata feels her eyes get wet because she understands exactly what he is talking about. I am also alone, she says, with a soft but firm voice. Not only because Thalia's dad abandoned us, but because I have been alone long before that. Fernando leans forward, giving her all his attention, and Renata feels the words she's kept for so long begin to flow. I fell in love with Javier when I was 28 years old, she starts, and the name comes out of her mouth like something bitter. He was charming, funny. He made me feel special. When I got pregnant, he swore we would be together forever. Thalia was barely 2 years old when he disappeared, says Renata, her fingers rolling and unrolling the napkin on the table. There was no fight. There was no argument. Simply, one day I came back from work and all his things had disappeared. Fernando clenches his fists on the table, feeling a righteous rage for this man he never met. He left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I'm not ready for this. I'm sorry." Renata lets out a humorless laugh. He didn't even have the courage to say goodbye to his own daughter, to look her in the eyes and explain why her daddy wasn't going to be there anymore. Tears run freely down her cheeks now, and she doesn't try to stop them because she is tired of pretending she is okay. I worked 3 jobs to support Thalia. I cleaned offices, sold cosmetics, worked in a coffee shop on weekends. Fernando listens without interrupting, without offering easy solutions or empty words of comfort. The only thing I wanted was for my daughter never to feel she lacked anything, never to believe she was a burden. Renata wipes her tears with the back of her hand. But the truth is that I did lack something. I lacked feeling loved. I lacked feeling that someone chose me not despite having a daughter, but together with her. Fernando extends his hand across the table slowly, giving her time to reject it if she wants. And when Renata places her hand over his, she feels a connection that goes beyond the physical. Tonight I came here without much hope, Renata admits with a sad smile. It was my 3rd attempt in 2 months, and the 2 previous ones ended exactly the same. The man sees Thalia, invents an excuse, and disappears. Fernando squeezes her hand gently, not letting go. When Ricardo did exactly that, I thought, that's it. This is all that awaits me. A life of rejections because I dare to love my daughter enough not to hide her. Her voice breaks saying this, and Fernando feels something inside him fracture too. But Thalia, says Renata, looking towards where her daughter now shows her tower to the play area employee. Thalia is the best part of me. She is brave where I am cowardly. She is honest where I am afraid. She is everything I aspire to be. Fernando looks towards the girl who changed everything with 6 simple words, and something in his chest, which had been frozen for 5 years, begins to melt. "I have never seen a child as an obstacle," he says with absolute conviction. "My nephews are the only thing that keeps me sane, the only thing that makes me laugh for real." He turns to Renata, his eyes meeting hers directly. "And Thalia?" He continues searching for the right words. "Thalia is extraordinary, not because she is polite or quiet, but because she had the courage to see two lonely people and decide to do something about it." Renata feels something warm expand in her chest, something she hasn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. "I know this is crazy," says Fernando, his hand still holding Renata's. "We are two complete strangers that a 6-year-old girl decided to put together in a restaurant in Querétaro." Renata laughs softly, wiping the last tears from her cheeks. "But there is something here," Fernando continues, and his voice has a certainty that surprises even himself. "Something I haven't felt in 5 years. Something I thought I would never feel again." He stops, conscious that he is on the verge of saying something he cannot take back. "I am not looking for just a woman, Renata. If I wanted that, I would have kept accepting the dates my sister organizes." He looks at her directly, without hiding behind the defenses he's used for so long. "I'm looking for something real, something worth the risk of feeling again." Renata feels her breathing accelerate, because this man is saying exactly what she has wanted to hear, but never dared to hope. "Thalia is not an obstacle for me," says Fernando firmly. "In fact, she makes me want to try this even more, because if I could forget my own walls because of a child's honesty, then maybe there is still hope for me." Renata finds no words to respond, so she simply squeezes his hand, that small gesture saying everything her voice cannot. And in that moment, in that restaurant full of strangers living their own lives, two broken people find in each other's cracks the possibility of being complete again. But what neither of them knows is that the true test of this connection is about to arrive. Time passes strangely when you are enjoying the moment, and before Renata realizes, it is already past 10 at night. Thalia returns from the play area with eyes shining with happiness, telling them about the tallest tower she ever built and about the girl she played with. Fernando listens to every detail with genuine interest, asking questions that demonstrate he is really paying attention. Renata observes the interaction between them and feels something she hadn't felt in 4 years. The possibility that things could be different. When the waiter brings the check, Fernando takes it before Renata can even protest. "Please," he says with a smile. This night was unexpected in the best possible sense. Renata accepts with gratitude, aware that her budget was not prepared for this extended outing. They walk together towards the restaurant exit, Thalia between the two, holding both hands, swinging happily. The night air of Querétaro is fresh and pleasant, and the city lights create an almost magical atmosphere. Fernando looks at his truck parked nearby, and then looks at Renata. "Can I take you home?" he asks. And although it is a simple question, both know it means something more. It means extending this moment a little longer. It means not wanting the night to end yet. Renata hesitates only a second before nodding, giving him the address of her small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The ride in the truck is quiet, with Thalia singing softly in the back seat, secured in her seatbelt. Fernando drives carefully, not only for safety, but because every minute that passes is one more minute with them. Renata looks out the window and then looks at him, still processing everything that happened tonight. "Thank you," she says softly, and Fernando turns briefly to look at her. "Why?" he asks, genuinely confused. "For not running away when you saw Thalia," Renata responds, her voice barely a whisper. "For listening to my story without judging me. For treating her as if she mattered." Fernando feels a knot form in his throat. "Your story matters, Renata. You matter." They are simple words, but the way he says them, with that absolute conviction, makes Renata feel something inside her heal just a little. They arrive at the modest building where Renata lives, an apartment complex that has seen better days, but is clean and well maintained. Fernando parks and everyone gets out of the truck. Thalia half asleep, but still aware of what is happening. They walk to the apartment door on the second floor, climbing the stairs in a comfortable silence. Renata looks for her keys in her bag, aware that this is the moment of farewell, aware that she doesn't know if she will see this man again, who appeared in her life in the most unexpected way. Fernando crouches down to be at Thalia's height, who looks at him with those huge eyes that begin to close from sleep. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Thalia," he says with a soft smile. "You are a very brave girl." Thalia smiles with pride, but then her expression changes to something more serious, more worried. Renata recognizes that look. It is the same one Thalia has when she is processing something important, something that scares her. The girl looks at Fernando, then at her mom, and then back at Fernando. There's a moment of silence where only the distant sound of city traffic is heard. And then Thalia asks, with a small voice that trembles at the end, "Are you going to abandon us like my dad did?" The world stops. Renata feels all the air leave her lungs, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces at that question her daughter just asked. Fernando remains completely motionless, processing the words of the 6-year-old girl who just verbalized the fear she's probably carried for years. Renata wants to intervene, wants to tell Thalia she shouldn't ask those questions, shouldn't scare people like that. But the words don't come out because she also needs to know the answer. She needs to know if this man who appeared in her life as an unexpected gift is going to stay, or if he is going to disappear like all the others. Fernando breathes deep, and Renata can see something cross his eyes, something that looks like pain and determination mixed. Fernando takes Thalia's small hands between his eyes never leaving the girl, and when he speaks, his voice is firm but gentle. "Listen to me closely, Thalia," he says, and there's a seriousness in his tone that makes even Renata hold her breath. "What your dad did was very wrong. Abandoning 2 people as special as you and your mom was the dumbest decision anyone could make." Thalia listens with absolute attention, her lips trembling slightly. "I cannot promise you that everything will be perfect," continues Fernando, choosing his words with the care given to something precious. "But I can promise you this. I would never do that to you." The words come out with a conviction that surprises even himself, but the moment he says them, Fernando knows they are true. "I would never abandon you like he did. I would never hurt you that way." Then he looks at Renata, who has the tears running down her cheeks, and says, "If you give me the chance, Renata, I would like to try this. I would like to know you better. I would like to be part of your lives." His voice breaks slightly at the end, revealing how much it cost him to say those words, how much fear he has of opening up again. But there he is, vulnerable and honest, waiting for an answer that could destroy him or save him. Renata cannot speak, emotions blocking her throat, so she simply nods while tears continue to fall. Thalia throws herself into Fernando's arms, hugging him with the strength only a child can have. And Fernando hugs her back, feeling the walls he built for 5 years finally crumble completely. After Thalia lets go of Fernando, Renata opens her apartment door and helps her daughter inside. "Go get ready for bed, my love," she tells her softly. And Thalia obeys after giving Fernando a last hug and telling him, "See you later, Mr. Fernando." When the girl disappears inside the apartment, Renata turns to Fernando, who remains in the doorway. The hallway is silent, except for the distant hum of a television in some nearby apartment. "I need your phone number," says Fernando, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "I don't want this night to end without knowing I can see you again." Renata gives him her number and watches as he carefully saves it in his phone. "I'm going to call you tomorrow," promises Fernando, and there is something in his voice that makes Renata believe him. They stay looking at each other for a moment that stretches, neither wanting to be the first to break eye contact. "Tonight," Renata starts to say, searching for the right words. "Tonight changed everything," Fernando completes, and she nods. He leans in and kisses her cheek softly, a simple gesture but charged with promise. "Good night, Renata," he says, walking away slowly. "Good night, Fernando," she responds, watching him walk towards the stairs. She closes her apartment door and leans against it, her heart beating with a mixture of hope and fear. She finds Thalia already in pajamas, waiting for her on the sofa. "Do you like Fernando, Mommy?" she asks with that brutal honesty of children. Renata sits next to her daughter and hugs her. "Yes, my love, I like him." And while Thalia falls asleep in her arms, Renata doesn't know that the next few days will put every word Fernando said tonight to the test. If you are liking this story, don't forget to like this video. The sun enters through the window of Renata's small apartment, marking the start of another day that feels strangely empty. Despite everything that happened last night, Thalia eats her pancakes while telling her mom with enthusiasm all about Mr. Fernando, about how he promised not to abandon them, about how he was so kind to them. Renata listens with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Because although she wants to believe every word Fernando said last night, experience has taught her to protect her heart. She checks her phone for the 5th time in the last hour, looking for some message or missed call. But the screen remains dark and silent. He said he would call today, she reminds herself, trying to calm the anxiety that begins to grow in her chest. She takes Thalia to school like every morning, kissing her forehead before seeing her run towards her friends in the playground. Then, she heads to her work in the offices she cleans, her hands executing automatic movements while her mind is elsewhere. Every time her phone vibrates, she takes it out hurriedly from her uniform pocket, only to find unimportant notifications or messages from her friend Rocio, asking how the date went. She doesn't know what to answer Rocio, because she doesn't know how to explain that she had the best night of her life. And now she is terrified that it was just a beautiful dream that vanished with daylight. The day passes with torturous slowness. each hour feeling like 3, and Fernando doesn't call. The second day is worse than the first, because now doubt has taken deep root in her mind. Renata tries to convince herself that maybe he is busy, that maybe he had a work emergency, that there are 1,000 valid reasons why he hasn't called. But the voice in her head, that cruel voice that has been fed by years of disappointments, whispers to her that she already knows the truth. Fernando regretted it. He probably got home, thought about everything involving being with a single mother, and decided it was too complicated. Thalia asks for him during dinner, her eyes bright with hope. "Did Fernando call already, Mommy?" she asks while moving her beans on the plate. Renata swallows the knot in her throat and forces a smile. "Not yet, my love, but he must be very busy with his work." Thalia nods, but Renata sees the shadow of disappointment that crosses her face and that hurts more than any personal rejection. That night, after putting Thalia to bed, Renata sits on the sofa and looks at her phone with a mixture of hope and resentment. She writes a message 3 times and deletes it 3 times because she doesn't want to seem desperate. She doesn't want to be that woman chasing a man who clearly changed his mind. But above all, she doesn't want to confirm what she already suspects, that she was a fool for believing that someone like Fernando could really want to be with someone like her. On the 3rd day, Renata wakes up with a heavy resignation in her chest. She doesn't check her phone with the same frequency. She doesn't jump every time it vibrates. The process of acceptance has begun. That painful adjustment of expectations she knows so well. At work, her friend Rocio finds her cleaning an office on the 12th floor and sits at one of the desks. "Tell me what happened," she demands with that direct way she has. Renata tells her everything while cleaning, the words coming out between mopping and dusting. The story of the magical night, followed by 3 days of absolute silence. Rocio listens attentively and then says, "Oh, friend, men are complicated, but 3 days without a call, after everything you said happened, that is not right." Renata feels the tears threatening to come out, but holding them back because she is at work. "I know," she admits. "I know. And I am a fool for having believed it would be different." Rocio hugs her tight, letting her friend lean on her for a moment. That night, Thalia is quieter than usual, drawing in her notebook without the usual enthusiasm. Renata sits next to her and sees she is crossing out the drawing she had made in the restaurant, those 3 figures that represented a family. "Why are you crossing out your drawing, my love?" she asks softly. Thalia leaves the crayon and looks at her mom with eyes bright with tears. "Because Fernando did abandon us like my dad," she says with a small voice that breaks Renata's heart into pieces. The 4th day arrives with a storm that lashes Querétaro. The gray sky, perfectly reflecting Renata's mood. It rains throughout the day, a constant downpour that causes streets to flood and people to run seeking shelter. Renata finishes her work shift soaked, her uniform sticking uncomfortably to her skin while she waits for the bus that will take her to pick up Thalia from school. Her phone is stored at the bottom of her bag. She doesn't even bother checking it anymore. She's past the point of hope and reached something worse. The bitter acceptance that she was naive to think things could be different. She picks up Thalia, who runs towards her under the rain with her small backpack over her head, trying not to get wet. On the bus back home, Thalia leans her head against her mom's arm, exhausted and sad. We aren't going to see Fernando anymore, are we, Mommy? She asks in a low voice. Renata kisses her daughter's head and responds with the truth that hurts the most. I don't think so, my love. They arrive at their building running under the rain, climbing the stairs while water drips from their clothes. Renata looks for her keys with hands trembling from the cold, ready to enter the safety of her apartment and end this horrible day. But then she hears footsteps on the stairs behind them, and a voice she would recognize anywhere. Renata, wait. She turns slowly, almost afraid she is imagining things. And there's Fernando, soaked by the rain, climbing the steps 2 at a time with an expression of urgency on his face. Renata remains frozen, not knowing whether to feel relief or fury, while Thalia hides behind her legs, confused by seeing the man she thought had abandoned them. Fernando reaches them, water dripping from his hair, his shirt stuck to his chest, breathing heavily not only from running up the stairs, but from something deeper. I'm sorry, he says immediately, the words coming out rushed. I am so sorry, Renata. I know I didn't call. I know days passed, and you must think the worst of me. Renata looks at him without expression, her defenses firmly in place after 4 days of pain. I wrote down your number wrong, continues Fernando, taking his phone out of his pocket and showing it to her. I swapped an 8 for a 3, and every time I tried to call you, a lady who sold tamales in Santiago de Querétaro answered me. Despite everything, Renata feels a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat, because it is so absurd it almost has to be true. Just this morning, my sister Laura suggested that maybe I had written the number wrong, explains Fernando, rainwater mixing with something that could be tears on his cheeks. I had to hire someone to find you. I gave him your name, where you work, the description of this building I remembered from the other day. Renata processes this information slowly, wanting to believe him, but afraid of being a fool again. Fernando takes a step closer, completely ignoring the fact that they are soaked in the middle of a hallway while the rain continues to lash outside. I have been in crucial meetings all week, he explains, his voice hoarse from emotion. Meetings I had scheduled months ago with international investors who flew specifically to meet with me. Renata listens without interrupting, still processing the fact that he is here, that he didn't abandon them. But every minute in those meetings, the only thing I could think about was you two. He continues, looking her directly in the eyes. About you, about Thalia, about how I had ruined it by not being able to call. He puts his hand in his pants pocket and takes out a folded paper, completely soaked. This is a delegation of duties contract, he says, showing it to her. I signed it this morning. I'm putting my partner and a team of trusted managers in charge of my company. Renata looks at him without understanding, waiting for him to continue. For 5 years, I have used work as an excuse not to live, explains Fernando. 16 hours a day in the office, 7 days a week, filling every second with meetings and projects so as not to have to face my loneliness. His voice breaks slightly. But meeting you made me realize something. I've been so busy building an empire that I forgot to build a life. Renata feels tears begin to roll down her cheeks, mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. I am not going to leave my company, clarifies Fernando quickly. But neither am I going to continue being a slave to it. I have worked too hard to have money and success I cannot enjoy with the people who matter. He gets closer, now only inches from Renata. I want time, Renata. Time to know you. Time to build something real. Time to be the man I promised to be when Thalia asked me if I was going to abandon you. Thalia, who has been listening to everything from behind her mom's legs, peeks her little head out. Did you really write the number wrong? She asks with that direct honesty of children. Fernando crouched down to be at her height and nods solemnly. Really, Thalia, and I am so sorry for making you wait. The girl studies him for a moment, deciding whether to believe him or not, and then she asks, Are you not going to work so much anymore? Fernando smiles, a genuine smile that illuminates his face despite the rain and cold. I am not going to work so much anymore, he promises, because I found something more important than work. Thalia seems satisfied with this answer and comes out completely from behind her mom. So, are you going to see us again? She asks with a hope in her voice. I am not only going to see you again, responds Fernando, looking at Renata. If your mom gives me another chance, I want to see you every day. Renata finally finds her voice, although it comes out weaker than she would like. It was 4 days, Fernando, she says, and there is pain in those words. 4 days thinking I had been wrong again, that I had been naive to believe someone like you could want to be with someone like me. Fernando stands up and takes her hands in his, wet and cold, but firm. They were the worst 4 days of my life, he admits. Every time I called that wrong number and the lady told me it wasn't Renata, I felt I was going crazy. He looks at her with an intensity that makes Renata feel butterflies in her stomach despite everything. I am not perfect, Renata. I made a stupid mistake writing down your number wrong, and I am going to make more mistakes in the future. His voice becomes softer, but firmer. But never. And listen to me well. Never will the mistake be letting you go. Never will it be not fighting for this. Renata feels her defenses begin to crumble. How the pain of the last 4 days starts to transform into something different. How do I know I can trust you? She asks, needing to hear the answer. Fernando lets go of one of her hands and takes out his phone again, opening his calendar. Look, he says, showing it to her. I canceled all my meetings for next week, all of them, because the only meeting that matters to me is with you. Renata looks at the screen and sees effectively that his calendar is empty, something Fernando admits he has never done in 10 years of career. I came here straight from the office, continues Fernando, putting away his phone. I didn't even stop by my house to change or get an umbrella, because when I finally got your correct address, the only thing that mattered was getting here before you lost all faith in me. He looks at Thalia and then back at Renata. I know 4 days don't seem like much time, but for someone who spent 5 years feeling nothing, every hour that passed without being able to talk to you felt like an eternity. Renata feels something warm expand in her chest, something she had been repressing for days for fear of being hurt again. I believed you when you said you would never abandon us, she says softly, and it broke my heart to think I had been wrong. Fernando squeezes her hands gently. You weren't wrong, he assures. What I said that night I meant seriously, every word, and I am here now, soaked and probably looking like a crazy person, to prove it to you. Thalia pulls on Fernando's shirt to get his attention. So can we go build the pillow fort now? She asks with renewed enthusiasm. Fernando laughs. That deep sound Renata already missed without knowing when she had started missing it. Yes, we can build all the pillow forts you want, he promises the girl. Then he looks at Renata with a silent question in his eyes, waiting for her verdict, waiting to know if he still has a chance. Renata looks at this man who appeared in her life in the most unexpected way, who was honest about his wounds, who made a promise to her daughter, and is here fulfilling that promise despite a stupid mistake. She looks at Thalia, who watches him with evident adoration, having already forgiven the 4 days of silence with the ease children have to forgive. And finally, she allows herself to feel what she's been holding back, real and true hope. Okay, she says, and a small smile begins to form on her lips. You can have another chance. Fernando releases the air he didn't know he was holding and smiles with a relief so palpable it makes Renata laugh. But, she adds, getting serious again, next time you write down my number, verify it twice. Fernando laughs and nods. I will verify it 10 times, he promises. Renata finally opens her apartment door, entering with Thalia, and turns to Fernando, who is still in the hallway. Aren't you coming in? She asks. You are soaked, and I think we should talk about what follows. Fernando enters the small apartment, so different from his luxurious home, but which feels warmer than any place he has been. Renata brings him a towel, and while he dries his hair, Thalia is already by his side, telling him about everything that happened at school this week. And Fernando, looking around this small space full of love, knows he made the right decision. Because sometimes what really matters is not measured in meetings or contracts, but in the eyes of a girl who believes in you, and in the smile of a woman who gives you a second chance. The following weeks are like a dream from which Renata is afraid to wake up. Fernando keeps every promise he made, appearing at her apartment every afternoon after picking Thalia up from school, taking them to dinner, to the park, to the movies. He doesn't arrive with expensive gifts or exaggerated gestures, but with his time, with his complete attention, with that genuine way of listening that makes both Renata and Thalia feel valued. Weekends are spent with Laura and Fernando's nephews, building those pillow forts Thalia wanted so much, playing in the garden, sharing family meals, where Renata finally understands where Fernando's warmth comes from. Laura hugs Renata as if she were family from day one, whispering in her ear, It's been 5 years since I saw my brother smile like this. One afternoon, while Thalia plays with the twins in the garden, Fernando takes Renata's hand and takes her aside. There is something different in his eyes, a mixture of nervousness and emotion Renata hadn't seen before. I need to tell you something, he starts. And for a terrible moment, Renata feels panic, thinking he is coming to end what they have built. But then Fernando smiles, that smile she now knows so well. I have been thinking a lot about the future, he says, caressing her hand with his thumb. About what I really want in life. Renata waits, her heart beating so fast she is sure he can hear it. I want to take you on a trip, says Fernando. And the statement is so unexpected that Renata blinks, confused. On a trip? She repeats without understanding. Fernando nods with enthusiasm. Yes, you, Thalia, and me. A full week, no work, no distractions, just us 3. Renata feels a mixture of excitement and panic tighten her chest. Fernando, I don't have money for a trip, and my job. He raises a hand gently, stopping her. I already spoke to your boss, he says, and at Renata's expression of surprise, adds quickly, just to ask if you could take a week of vacation, nothing else, and the trip would be my gift. Please, don't reject it. Renata wants to protest, wants to say it is too much, but the hope shining in Fernando's eyes stops her. Where would we go? She asks softly. Fernando smiles even wider. That is a surprise, but I need to know if you trust me enough to say yes. Renata looks towards the garden where Thalia laughs with the twins, completely happy, and thinks about how her life has changed in these weeks. She thinks about how Fernando has kept every promise, how he has demonstrated with actions, not just words, that he is committed to them. Yes, she says finally, and the smile that illuminates Fernando's face makes her know she made the right decision. Yes, I trust you. The morning of the trip, Fernando arrives early at Renata's apartment with his truck loaded with suitcases he packed himself. Thalia is so excited she could barely sleep the night before, jumping around the apartment while her mom tries to comb her hair. Can you tell me where we are going now? The girl pleads for the 10th time. Fernando laughs and crouches to her height. We are almost at the airport. I'll tell you there. The journey to the airport is full of speculation by Thalia, who lists all the places she knows thanks to cartoons in school. When they finally arrive and Fernando buys the tickets, Thalia sees the destination printed, and her eyes widen like saucers. Acapulco! She shouts so loud that several people in the airport turn to look. Are we really going to Acapulco? Renata feels her eyes fill with tears because she remembers perfectly the conversation weeks ago when she told Fernando that Thalia dreamed of seeing the sea, of knowing Acapulco after seeing photos in a school book. You said it was her dream, Fernando whispers in her ear while Thalia jumps with emotion. I wanted to make it come true. Renata hugs him, not caring that they are in the middle of the airport full of people, not caring about anything else but this man who listens, who remembers, who fulfills dreams she didn't even know she was allowed to dream. The flight is short but magical, with Thalia glued to the window, watching the clouds, the ocean appearing as an infinite extension of blue. When they arrive at the hotel, a beautiful resort facing the beach, Thalia runs directly to the room balcony and shouts, Mommy, look at the sea. It's bigger than I imagined. Renata stands next to her daughter, hugging her by the shoulders, and both observe the Pacific stretching to the horizon. Fernando watches them from the room door, memorizing this moment, this image of the two people who have become his whole world. The following days are a succession of perfect moments. Thalia building sandcastles, while Fernando helps with a dedication that makes Renata laugh. The three swimming in the waves with Thalia squealing with joy every time a soft wave reaches them. Eating fish tacos at street stands, which Fernando investigates carefully to make sure they are safe. At night, after Thalia falls asleep, exhausted from the day's fun, Fernando and Renata walk on the beach holding hands, their feet sinking into the wet sand, while the waves lick the shore. Thank you, says Renata one of those nights, stopping to look at him under the moonlight, for all this, for making us feel so special. Fernando pulls her towards him, his arms surrounding her in a hug that feels like home. You are special, He responds with a voice hoarse from emotion. You are the most special thing that has happened to me in life. And under that starry sky of Acapulco, with the sound of the ocean as a witness, Fernando kisses Renata for the first time. A kiss that tastes like sea salt and fulfilled promises. The 5th day of the trip, Fernando acts strange since they wake up. He is nervous, checks his phone constantly, and when Renata asks him if everything is okay, he simply smiles and says everything is perfect. After breakfast, he asks Renata to take Thalia to walk on the beach while he resolves some work. Renata accepts, although she notices something odd in his behavior. They walk along the shore for almost an hour, collecting seashells Thalia wants to take home to show at school. When they return to the hotel room, Fernando is waiting for them on the balcony with a nervous smile. I have something to show you, he says, and his voice trembles slightly. He guides them not to their room, but to a different door at the end of the hall. He opens the door and Renata is left breathless. The room has been transformed into something out of a dream. White flowers everywhere, aromatic candles creating a soft and warm light. And in the center, on the bed, there's a simple but beautiful white dress. Next to the dress is a small box Renata recognizes immediately, a ring box. Her hands fly to her mouth, while tears begin to flow freely. Fernando, what is this? She whispers, although her heart already knows the answer. Thalia runs to the bed and takes the box, opening it to reveal 2 white gold rings shining under the candlelight. Mommy, they are rings, she shouts with emotion, and then looks at Fernando with sudden understanding. And in that moment, Renata knows her life is about to change forever. Fernando takes Renata's hand, which trembles visibly, and guides her to the center of the room. Thalia follows him, hugging the ring box against her chest as if it were the most valuable treasure in the world. Renata, begins Fernando, and his voice is charged with emotion. When Thalia approached my table weeks ago and told me that you were also alone, something inside me that had been dead for 5 years came back to life. Renata cries openly now, without trying to hide the tears. I spent 5 years convinced that love was not for me, that it was safer to live locked in work and in the pain of the past. He kneels in front of her, and Renata feels her knees weaken. But you two taught me that true love is not the one that never hurts you, but the one that gives you the courage to try again, despite the fear. Thalia approaches and stands next to Fernando, who surrounds her with an arm. I have spoken with Thalia about this, says Fernando, looking at the girl with tenderness, and she gave me her blessing. Thalia nods solemnly. I told him yes, Mommy, because Fernando is good to us and isn't going to abandon us ever. Fernando returns his attention to Renata, taking out the larger ring from the box Thalia holds. Renata, would you do me the honor of marrying me? Would you let me be part of your family, love you, and take care of you for the rest of my life? Renata cannot speak, words drowned by emotion, so she simply nods again and again while tears fall. Fernando slides the ring on her finger with trembling hands, and then does something neither expected. He takes the smaller ring from the box and kneels in front of Thalia. Thalia, he says with a serious voice but full of love, would you do me the honor of being your dad? Not to replace anyone, but to be here for you, to take care of you, to love you as you deserve to be loved. Thalia looks at the small ring, a delicate silver band with a small pink stone, and then looks at her mom seeking permission. Renata nods through tears, and Thalia extends her trembling hand. Fernando places the ring on her little finger, the only one where it fits, and Thalia throws herself into his arms, shouting, "Yes, yes, I want you to be my dad." Fernando hugs her tight, his own tears falling now, and Renata joins the hug, the three forming a perfect circle of love and promises. They remain like that for long minutes, until Thalia separates and asks with curiosity, "And when is the wedding?" Fernando looks at Renata with a mischievous smile. "Well, about that, there is something else I want to show you." He guides them out of the room, going down the elevator, crossing the hotel lobby until reaching the beach. And there, at the end of the hotel's private beach, is an arch of white flowers decorated with fabrics, waving in the sea breeze. A man dressed formally waits under the arch, clearly an officiant. And Laura is there too with her 3 children, all dressed elegantly. Renata stops in her tracks, understanding what she is seeing. "I thought that if you said yes, we could get married here now with the people we love most as witnesses," explains Fernando nervously. "But if you want to wait, if you want a big wedding with all your friends and family, I understand perfectly." Renata looks at the arch of flowers, looks at Laura, who smiles at her with tears in her eyes, looks at Thalia, who jumps with excitement, and looks at Fernando, who watches her with pure and simple love. "I don't want to wait," she says finally, her voice firm despite the tears. "I don't need a big wedding or an elaborate dress. I just need you, Thalia, and this perfect moment." Fernando lets out a sigh of relief and kisses her softly. "The dress is in the room," he says, pointing towards the hotel. "Laura helped choose it, hoping you would say yes. Go change while I get ready here." Renata runs back to the room with Thalia, who doesn't stop talking about how exciting all this is. The white dress is simple but beautiful, exactly the type of dress Renata would have chosen, without excesses or complications, just elegant and perfect. Laura appears at the door with the twins, bringing fresh flowers for Renata's hair. "Welcome to the family," she tells her, hugging her tight. "My brother finally found what he was looking for." She gets ready quickly, with Laura helping her with her hair, and Thalia insisting that she needs to put on her favorite dress too. When they are ready, the 3 walk back to the beach. The sun begins to descend towards the horizon, painting the sky oranges and pinks, when Renata walks barefoot on the sand towards the arch of flowers where Fernando awaits her. He wears a light suit without a tie, the first buttons of his shirt open, perfect for a beach wedding. His eyes fill with tears when he sees her approaching, and Renata feels her heart overflow with love for this man who appeared in her life in the most unexpected way. Thalia walks next to her mom, proud to be part of this moment, her small ring shining on her hand. The officiant begins the ceremony with simple but meaningful words about love finding its way, even in the most unexpected places. Fernando and Renata wrote their own vows, and when it is his turn, Fernando takes Renata's hands and says, "Renata, I promise to love you on the easy days and the difficult ones. I promise to be the man Thalia deserves to have as a father. I promise never to forget how lucky I am that a brave girl decided I was also alone." Renata laughs through tears and responds, Fernando, I promise to trust you even when fear tells me not to. I promise to build a life with you based on the honesty that brought us here. I promise to love you with everything I am. The officiant declares them husband and wife. And when Fernando kisses Renata under the arch of flowers with the ocean as a witness, Laura and the children applaud and shout with joy. But it is Thalia who steals the moment when she runs towards them and hugs them tight, shouting with tears of happiness in her eyes. My mom is not alone anymore. The small group celebrates on the beach while the sun sets completely, the children running on the sand, Laura taking photos of every moment. Fernando lifts Thalia in his arms and she hugs him around the neck. Can I call you Dad now? She asks shyly. Fernando feels his throat close with emotion. Nothing would make me happier, he responds with a hoarse voice. Thalia smiles hugely and shouts, I have a dad. I have a real dad. Renata watches them, her new husband and her daughter, and feels a peace she never believed possible. Later, when the children are exhausted and Laura takes them to the hotel to sleep, Fernando and Renata walk on the beach as husband and wife. I can't believe that just weeks ago I was sitting alone in that restaurant, thinking my life would always be like that, says Fernando, stopping to look at the ocean. And now I have a family. I have a reason to wake up every morning that goes beyond work and money. Renata snuggles against him, feeling the warmth of his body against the cool of the night. Thalia always says miracles exist, she says softly. I never really believed her until now. Fernando kisses her forehead. She was right. Miracles exist. And sometimes they come in the form of a 6-year-old girl with the courage to tell the truth. They walk back to the hotel holding hands, their ring shining under the moonlight, ready to start their life together. And while Thalia sleeps in the room next door, hugging her small ring, she dreams of a future full of pillow forts, laughter, and a dad who promised never to leave. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, because we all deserve a second chance at love. We all deserve to find someone who sees us complete and not broken. And we all deserve to be loved exactly as we are. May God bless your life with the same true love that united this family. May He give you Thalia's bravery to speak your truth, Renata's strength to keep believing, and Fernando's courage to tear down the walls in love again. Amen.